This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. Watching pubs that wouldn't recognise an overball 10 months of the year put a fixture list outside, nodding passively as your uncle tells you Marcus Smith can't tackle, even though he's got the best tackle completion of any starting 10 in the Premiership. Seeing Paula from work beat you in the Fantasy Rugby League because you bet too hard on the Italians. There's nothing quite like it. This Friday night brings us Rugby Christmas. 5 weekends of the game at its best. 50 matches that matter more than any other logged this year. Sixmas is just days away. The glorious oval light that brings us out of the cold. And what a year 2025 promises to be. Potentially the tightest, most competitive tournament the Championship has ever seen. The gap between sides has never been this small, and most games have never been so hard to call in an era where rugby has never been this good. So let's dig in. What should we expect from this year's Six Nations tournament? What challenges face all the sides involved? And just who is going to win the 2025 Six Nations Championship? After a baffling few years, England might just be the most fascinating team in this year's tournament. 2024 was a difficult year for Blank Sheet of A4 RFC to quantify. Their win count dipped significantly, yet the team stand, having made clear progress over the last 12 months. England were in every game 2024 presented them come the last 10 minutes of the match. Clear growth from the boom or bust side they'd been, so often forcing and controlling games that previously would have got away from them. They just didn't actually win anything like enough of them. So much of their continued grip on games comes from the now most discussed aspect of their play over the last 12 months, the now infamous hammer defence. An adaptation developed by Irish former South Africa defence coach Felix Jones, the system's goal is to keep England in command of matches even when the opposition have the ball. The idea is to build on what Jacques Nienaber did with the Springboks, creating an incredibly aggressive defence built on a handful of players flying out of line to apply extra pressure whilst the rest of the team tracked across trying to squeeze the opposition. Essentially what this looks like is England like to overload the space. Where most teams would figure one guy can cover all of this ground, England drop in two because it puts more pressure on the ball handler to drop it, hoping for that mistake. Look at the way Tom Curry here flies up at the space outside Beauden Barrett, meaning he can't float on the ball, prompting an error. Curry isn't marking anyone, just this gap, and it's hugely effective, forcing that knock on. However, having lost Felix Jones since last September, the system has instead been overseen these last few months by new defence coach Joe Alabd, who tweaked the system to his liking, and perhaps the question that would define England's 2025 in rugby at least is whether those tweaks can begin to click. This moment highlights both the good and bad of the system. Japan's attack is set quickly but totally catches them behind the gain line, and Martin does the same thing the following phase. With the Blossoms now on the back foot, England can finally run their USP and flood the field. 5 defenders marking 3 attackers here, and with the wing ignored, the catch-up defence should be able to cover it. They flood up and almost prompt errors. Slight home shoots out a line to eat Riley but forgets to chew. Falling off the tackle, and it means the centre can draw Furbank coming into the line and put Osada away down the wing. England are so focused on destroying Japan, they forget to contain them, and it leads to a clean break down this touchline. However, there isn't all to worry. Marcus Smith makes a really good tackle in defence, resets immediately. Genge getting off the line and Martin making extra contact to keep them behind the gain line. Japan look to go wide as there is a bit of an overlap with English resources focused tight, but Slade absolutely hammers in on the second receiver and it shuts off Karan's options, forcing him to take it in himself instead of using the space wider. Again, behind the gain line, Japan attempt to reload, but everyone is still finding their position, and yet Slade is still up so fast for a second phase in a row, causing Fafita to take his eye off the ball, knocking it on. England pin Japan behind the gain line on 6 of their 7 phases, and do win the ball back in the end, creating that error. They just also happen to concede 40 metres on the one where they don't force them behind the gain line. This is an all or nothing tactic, where the Springbok version developed failsafe upon failsafe to make scenarios like this impossible, or at least highly unlikely. England are still trying to find those and iron out kinks, and how they do in this year's Six Nations is likely going to be defined by how quickly they find them and adapt. Instead of merely containing teams, England want to use their defence as a weapon to get on top. They just need to find ways to make sure they don't use it to shoot themselves in the foot, especially when they find themselves starting the tournament with a trip away to defending back-to-back champions Ireland in Dublin. Ireland right now feel in a slightly odd place, and I don't mean D4. Under Andy Farrell, this team has become almost inarguably the best side the Emerald Isle has ever put together. 2 Six Nations titles, a series win in New Zealand and a drawn series in South Africa, and technically also a joint best ever World Cup in 2023. 24 was, by anyone's standards, a very good year. They won the Six Nations, they beat South Africa in South Africa, and managed 8 wins from 11 matches. Yet I can't shake the feeling, nor can quite a few fans Northern Ireland, I think, that this team is starting to look like they're maintaining an extremely high standard instead of continuing to get better. This becomes particularly interesting with the quirks of the 2025 campaign, with Andy Farrell off on lines duty and replaced by his usual defence coach, Simon Easterby. Now, there may be some questions as to whether Easterby will tweak or make changes, but Ireland's style of play has scarcely changed at all in the last 3 years. The Green Badgers have scarcely even had to refine the game plan Farrell built and brought in over his first 18 months in charge. Perhaps most interestingly, even when attack coach Mike Catt departed after the summer tour of South Africa, Ireland's shape, structure and style has continued to look exactly the same. Catt was replaced in November by Leinster pop pass guru Andrew Goodman, and virtually nothing has changed since the switch. No attempt to put Mike Catt amongst the pigeons, Goodman has kept his predecessor system down to a T. As more and more teams edge towards appropriating Eddie Jones's patented positionless rugby idea, Ireland continue to really rock an increasingly retro 1-3-2-2. Yet, when they wear it, it feels brand new. The idea is simple. You split your forwards into 4 groups which act as waves of the attack. 1 sticks the blind side alone with 3 group near the ruck, then 2 forwards around the 10-metre line and an additional pair of carriers out wide, able to split off and just run support lines if needs be. It means the team always has shape, always has structure, and critically, it allows Ireland so much more freedom when it comes to Goodman's real passion in life. I presume I don't know anything about his wife. Set piece moves. Though there is a close second, maybe third place. Building websites. And so, one of the first things Goodman did after coming in was head to Squarespace. When Mike Catt had the Ireland squad using old school HTML and hex code from back when he was playing in the 90s, Squarespace allowed Goodman to build a beautiful website simply, and thanks to Squarespace's new AI features, it's easier than ever. It just takes a few clicks, a few options, and maybe putting in a few words, and you can have an entire site brought broadly together, ready for you to tweak and poke and make your own, add personality upon personality to, thanks to the super easy to use interfaces and endless suite of features. Goodman adding one new page with one new different feature for every pass Leinster did all season, and he didn't even run out, such as Squarespace's wealth of options. And if you want to start your own website, right, then please head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidgeRugby to save yourself some money on that website. But yeah, this guy loves set piece moves. Did with Leinster, and particularly seems to with Ireland. This is a particularly good one of a 6-man line-out. It's clean ball at the tail to give the Argentine forwards no time to flood out into the main line, and they immediately shift it wide to the 2 forwards left in the back line, obviously contorted to carry. Except last second, Prendergast wraps around from the wing if he starts right out there, into their boot, the space behind, taking the pass. A guy not at all previously in the eye line of Archie defenders moments earlier suddenly has the ball. Ringrose absolutely bowls over opposite number Sinti here, and it brings the fullback up into the line, forced up, low, bought time then to throw the pass over the top. And second phase, Argentina are stretched so wide, having headed it to cover the wing, that Prendergast hits up that first 3-man wave, only for Osborne in position to link up with the first 2-man group when he spots a gap. Argentina win a brilliant turnover, but the pressure is properly on, and if Ireland kept hold of that, you suspect this pressure will continue for phase after phase. Because there is one shift since Goodman came in, and that's how much deeper this team plays. This passage against Wales in the last Six Nations, and this in that game against Argentina, are 2 examples of Ireland running the exact same play. There's one body extra in the attack here, so it goes slightly smoother against the Pumas, but it's the same play. Except, where under Catt, the distance between Ireland's flattest and deepest runner is about 7 metres, under Goodman, the new attack coach, it's about 15, meaning there's about twice the depth in this attack. And the impact is pretty clear. Even though against Wales they have the extra body, this being so tight forces defenders to commit, because if they don't, there's no second chance. Pushing off anyone will likely result in a break, because the Irish defenders are all on each other's shoulders, able to pass or offload at any moment's notice. But Argentina here can afford to just drift off Mac Hansen entirely, because the catch-up defence has him covered. Sinti easily catches Byrne, and because they started so much deeper, Ireland only make it about up the gain line despite finding quite a bit of space. The upshot of the approach can be seen in that move off the line out. Under Catt, Lowe never would have had the time to weigh up which pass to throw here, as he'd been making it so much closer to the defender's face. And yet it also allows a smart defender, and there's plenty of those in the Six Nations, time to cover the many options Ireland like to throw in an opposition's eye line. Whether Goodman begins to evolve this attack or Easterby adjusts his team without Papafaz's supervision remains to be seen, and will very much be the green story of the Six Nations. Because a third straight championship win would shortly put Ireland amongst the greats. The first three-peat in Six Nations history, and on technicality, depending on whether or not you count the shared titles that pop up in Wales and France's Imperial Five Nations run from the days before points difference when they used to share titles instead, it could be the first 3 outright titles in consecutive years ever. Yet, standing in the way would be the tournament favourites, France! After an odd year, very much weathering a World Cup hangover, staring off into middle distance, dreaming of having Roman and Antoine back in their life, France have finally got what they want. The Toulouse halfbacks that have been tearing up club rugby for the last 3 months and Test rugby for the last 5 years are back. The linchpins of a side that's been impossible to take your eyes off for anyone that follows club rugby. Whilst the jury is still debating his status as the greatest, I remain adamant that Antoine Dupont is the best rugby player to have ever played the game. His skill set is the most complete I've ever seen, married to a game intelligence and vision only seen in a very, very, very small handful of players over the sport's 200 plus year history. This, of course, made an immediate impact when he came back in during the Autumn Internationals. France suddenly, once again, sure which team was going to turn up. Even when not blasting genius from every speaker, Dupont's ability to get his side on the front foot is just spectacular. When Cam Roigard retires, people probably speak of the day he outplayed Dupont in Paris last November, and yet to look at Antoine's performance in that game is to see how and why France won that match. Dupont is just so good at getting his team going forward. Dupont's play as a raw scrum half is exceptional. He's so good at just getting his team going forward, at increasing the ground carriers around him and running off him can make. Whether it's things like this, Aldry is caught behind the gain line and Surveyor makes such a mess of the breakdown, and with Satiti about shooting to win a turnover, any other team just as well to keep hold of the ball. They're happy if they still got it, even if they lose 5 metres. But Aldry pings it up to Dupont's face. His reaction speed to take this alone is hugely impressive, especially one-handed, but the way he drifts off, makes eye contact with Sevi Rees, then drops it on the toe is insane. The accuracy on the cross kick, leaving Beal Barry a deflection from Will Jordan away from turning bad ball about to be turned over into a try. The All Blacks targeted Toto harder than maybe I've ever seen them target any other player in history, yet Dupont's reaction was to forget about the bullshit factor and just play as a normal scrum half, and he's so good. Burros here smashed the ball up from the back, and he just kind of lobs the ball backwards for Antoine to find it. The 9 picks it up, and noticing his opposite number has folded too hard, he darts at the fringe. Even though Roigard utterly dominates him in contact here, Dupont is so ludicrously strong he draws 3 tacklers, having bounced one before flicking it onto Boudin, who drives through Roigard, the pair making a collective 20 metres. Antoine having put him in a position to make that carry. Dupont is the top carrier in the Champions Cup so far this season, and was last season, and it's this legit threat in contact that makes him so dangerous, especially when paired with the sheer number of carrying threats France have available. Here, he's just throwing simple passes one out time after time, but the All Blacks defence is standing off, standing back, because they have to watch Antoine, which means they can't get up and meet the likes of Miafu in front of the gain line. Dupont then telling Malvaca to go himself before picking up himself the following phase to draw the eyes and hitting Miafu, arriving late. He then picks up and plays himself again, throwing a little double pump to draw Surveyor, meaning Satiti has no choice but to come in from 2 out and chop Gros, who is the first man out, which has a pretty chunky knock-on effect, especially when paired with a superb pick and go, something France is so good at. Because Satiti, third man out, has had to tackle the first Frenchman out with Surveyor dedicated to Dupont, those All Black forwards all fold around the ruck, yet the pick and go results in 2 sets of tacklers piled on top of each other. Nobody has been able to fold open side, meaning the entire All Black pack is within 7 or 8 metres of each other here. Even far side winger Rees is on this side of the post, and it allows Dupont to pull the trigger alongside Ramos, passing between his forwards for his maverick mate to put Burros over for his first Test try. Even when it isn't making clean breaks or scoring spectacular tries, which is frankly still very rare, very few players have the sheer impact on the game of Dupont. But the best news for France's Six Nations is for the first time in 2 years that influence will be paired by his iconic halfback partner, Roman Untermack. No other player in the world is better at using the space Dupont can create, and that his mere presence on a pitch will no doubt inspire with defenders turning their eyes towards him than King Quaff here. This try against Ulster is a prime example, picking a brilliant line because he knows all eyes are on his petty mucker. These scenarios occur naturally, but France will also likely pull on Toulouse's huge bag of set plays, looking to orchestrate these situations artificially. This is a superb move. Dupont loop shock Barres, and he's so dangerous the entire Ulster backline swivel to watch him. However, Untermack in turn also loops, wrapping around, gifted time to make a lovely flat pass to bring Ramos onto the ball. Cox shits himself and Ulster are left scrambling. Toulouse have so many numbers that LaBelle is able to put fellow winger Capuzzo over for the score. All of that coming from the eyes Antoine draws and the way Roman is able to effortlessly unlock every space that appears around him as a result. Yet the main reason to be excited about them is their absurd, seemingly telepathic link. This doesn't quite result in a try, but it's insane. Untermack begins his run on the far side of the scrum, but Dupont knows exactly where he's going to be. It's a better deflection off the thigh, away from being a score for either Andermatt or Lebel. And when you consider France can also call on Bordeaux's pair of bullshit wingers, it gets even more exciting. Both are in absurd form.
Louis Bielbarré
He scored 15 tries in the last 16 games, and Damien Penaud is on 15 from 12 this season, making this a French team that's not just the favourites of the tournament, but bound to be everyone's favourite to watch. In their first opponent, Wales, however, the situation is not quite so fun. Cymru entered this year's Six Nations in their lowest place for over 80 years and their worst ever on the world rankings front, as Wales went 2024 without winning a single test match. 12 losses from 12. And yet, there is cause for some hope. Returning captain Jack Morgan, who missed last year's championship, is legitimately just one of the best players in the world and arriving in rare form. Man of the match in 4 of his last 6 games at club level, while veterans Josh Adams, Talupa Faletau, Liam Williams and Thomas Williams are all also back, which adds a bit of nous to the incredibly young Welsh side we saw run out last year. And yet, perhaps the biggest potential for change of fortune comes in the land of my father's at least favourite old position, fly half. For this February, March and very last day of January, in Wales, hope has a new, quite extraordinarily young face. Coach Warren Gatland recently made the incredibly bold decision to include just one specialist 10 in his extended squad for this year's Six Nations, and the even bolder decision to make it uncapped 21-year-old Dan Edwards. Now, Edwards is probably an unknown quantity to most fans outside of Wales, but for those within it, he might be one of the most exciting prospects the Principality's produced for some time. Ever since this try to seal a local derby in his first game of professional rugby, Edwards has taken the elite level in his stride. He's a remarkably confident, composed young kid. Almost like a Gen Z reboot of local legend Dan Biggar, Edwards possesses the blazing confidence in his own ability, yet is unbelievably laid back, utterly unfazed by any error he or a teammate commits. This was perhaps most famously captured by his brilliant last-minute winning drop goal against Ulster last season, in the first full 80 minutes of his professional career, and just his 4th start. Yet dig into his other appearances, and you get a real sense of the brilliant, instinctive feel for a game that makes him so special. This try was the headline from a superb performance against the Stormers. A lovely and well-timed support line to dive under the bar, but the kid is so much more than his highlight reel. After kicking a conversion to put his team in the lead, Edwards here is in control from the off. He's talking the entire time and orders a box kick, which is regathered by Luke Morgan, his winger. The Ospreys spread it, and once the ball is playable again, he steps in at 10 and does a superb job. Nobody's in motion, so it shouldn't be a gain line threat, but he just takes a glance at Nell here, who's rushing out of line, and sends Lake right on his inside, into a tiny gap, and it gets him onto the front foot. Edwards reloads immediately into the boot, and with the winger only just back on his feet and rushed into the main line for the Stormers, he drops it onto the toe, in behind. The offload is loose, but it results ultimately in a moment in flanker Harry Deves breaking the line, and watch how Edwards immediately sets off in support, running a line for the offload. It's brilliantly picked, away from defenders, yet close enough to take the offload, and if not for a double effort by Maffey, he may just score this. It naturally takes him out of the game for a moment, but he instantly gets up and orders his team to shape. However, Ratty gets caught behind the gain line here, and the next phase then, so does Tipperick. The team are going backwards, but spotting the Stormers' lines congested in the middle, he quickly rushes around to this side to attack. But the pass is too early and it misses him. It's all happened too quickly, leading to a third successive phase of backwards ball. Ratty is caught behind the gain line as Edwards gets off the floor, and he instantly makes his decision. Watkin takes it in as he jogs back into the pocket, calls the ball, and absolutely drills a drop goal. 3 points to extend the lead to 4. This is what I like so much about Edwards. He's superb at getting attack moving, going forwards, bringing runners onto the ball at pace and playing a lot of himself, but he always feels in control of a game. He has such a feel for momentum. The split second the Stormers' defence here gets on top, he knows 7 isn't coming, so he takes 3, and he keeps the pressure on the scoreboard, not allowing the defence to get over and win a turnover or push them back any further, something he also did against Montpellier a few weeks later. Over the last year, Wales have broadly looked quite directionless. It's been one of the big problems with their game. The 24 Six Nations were spent trying to work on an attack first game plan that didn't click at all. Then this summer they reverted back to Gatland's tried and tested very defensive kicking oriented tactics, and when that didn't work, they spent the autumn attempting a baffling middle ground between the two that didn't work either. It led to a team who looked confused, playing structure that didn't seem to work, and yet whilst it's a lot of pressure to put on a young kid, Edwards feels a bit like he could be the missing piece. A guy who can glue those two things together. His ability to feel the pulse of a game as it's going on could be exactly what Wales need if they're to cause a mighty upset against, well, anyone in this year's Six Nations. But their best shot at a win might come in round 2 as they play an Italy side looking to build on their best Six Nations tournament ever. Whilst previous coach Kieran Crowley brought Italy's standards up enormously by installing a superb attack, his successor, Gonzalo Quesada, has managed to emphasise, underline and properly push the team forwards by underlining their attack with an incredibly intelligent kicking game. It's all built around the chase. Instead of traditional carry, then let's just reset and hoof the ball in the air, Italy would do this so often, sending a huge wedge of 4 forwards into contact, looking for momentum to generate front foot ball, gain line carry, to then kick off, then hanging it in line with the breakdown, using those 4 forwards as a critical part of the chase, just behind the main winger. On this occasion, Parney over chasers, but that follow-up quad contains their biggest breakdown threats. Lamro brings Stewart down and allows him to present the ball before driving through the ruck. Ruta spots this and essentially moves to clear out his own captain, making the ball incredibly messy for Mitchell. The Northampton nipster has to go full Stephen Donald to fish the ball out, allowing Negri, Fischetti and Cannone to shoot up before Stewart has really cut the ball properly. The prop gets stripped, giving Italy's better aligned, better plotted defence the ball. And the Azzurri, the kind of broken field scenario from which they thrive so often. This 4-man wedge box kick play is frankly inspired, forcing both the defence onto the back foot right before the kick comes and giving Italy multiple chances to get the ball back, using the best personnel in each situation. However, with the changing blocking laws, over the autumn Italy drastically reduced the number of contestable kicks they were hanging, instead looking long for territory. And yet this is broadly in keeping with head coach Gonzalo Quesada's entire career. As coach of the Jaguares in Argentina, Quesada's side pretty much ignored contestable kicks, kicking almost entirely exclusively long for territory, topping Super Rugby for kicking meters 3 years in a row. However, whilst at Stade Francais as their head coach, Quesada switched it up and kicked much shorter, more contestable, balls hung narrow to be chased. 2 very distinct, opposing kicking game plans, both grafted onto a side who previously didn't have much of one. The summer was broadly a free hit against smaller opposition, meaning Quesada's first year in charge gave him just one campaign, trialling either approach. So I'd be fascinated to see which Quesada settles on for this campaign as pressure starts to apply itself, or whether they instead try to marry the two up, becoming a much more rounded team than they were before, being all or nothing. Because these tactics both exist primarily to feed and underline their attack. Tommaso Menoncello's lovely late try against the All Blacks was a direct product of their kicking game, and in a less direct way, so too was this from Tommaso Allen against England. Italy set up the wedge here and Negri takes it in, not really looking to win any ground, just to set up a clean phase of ball to kick off. This is the same setup Italy use every time they boot the ball from outside their own 22 so far in the game. So England just fall into position and they go, right, we'll receive the bomb, let's set up, let's all jog back, let's all get in position, Freddie Stewart will take it and we'll do the whole thing again and we'll kick it properly and then it'll all be fine. However, this time, the 4-man ruck isn't being used to generate a long ruck, but instead a quick one. Before the wedge is even set, Allen spots that England only have Slade and Daly out wide, information fed to Brex and in turn to Paolo Garbisi. Ruta rejoins the line to play as Brex's tip-on runner, with Marler mentally jogging back. Garbisi calmly positions himself off-screen to target Chesham instead. Brex runs a brilliant line to take Slade out of the game, and Ruta's short line holds the inside defender for just a half second. By the time Garbisi draws Daly and delivers, it's essentially a foot race between Allen and prop Marler, who is only just working across. Stewart has been anticipating a high kicks has to sprint up from deep. He's miles back. Italy get on their outside and link up with Allen, who sprints it in, all coming from the damage their kicking game has been causing over the full match, changing how England defend. The next time Italy set up the kick in this position, however, Marler is hyper aware they could switch up any moment, and England only start tracking back once Garbisi has rolled the ball all the way to the back of the ruck. It leads to England failing to set a convoy, which is now legal anyway, but ignore that. Nobody blocking Parney from contesting for the ball in the air. With the new law making this a default, we can perhaps expect Italy to try being even trickier around the halfway line, particularly with their kicking game, because they're probably going to need all the guile they can conjure as they face Scotland up first, an away game they've broadly struggled in since they last conquered Murrayfield 10 whole years ago this annum. It's been an odd build-up for Scotland. A phenomenal generation of talent has broadly underperformed expectations year on year, year after year. For about the 7th championship in a row, there's a huge wave of people at home going, this could be Scotland's year. And yet, over the last decade, no silverware has come. For some years now, Scottish hopes have been largely pinned to the wrists of one man. Finn Russell is, simply put, one of the best 10s, one of the best rugby players in the world, and has been for some years now. Possibly the best open field passer of the ball out there, and gifted with a mad, maverick, genius touch on the ball. Russell's growth into a proper all-rounder, top-tier temperament 10 without losing an ounce of the bullshit that made him so special in the first place has been incredibly special to witness. And yet, with a potentially pivotal Six Nations on the horizon, head coach Gregor Townsend is now looking to spread the weight beyond his standoff. Scotland, over the last 12 months, have handed more and more of their playmaking off to other players with every campaign. In part inspired by Ireland's all-court approach, having an entire backline able to step in at 10 if needs be, Townsend has put real emphasis on growing Scotland's attack beyond just creating opportunities for fun with Finn. Sione Tuipulotu, injured for the Six Nations, slotting in at 10 has now become a regular sight. Often initially just to give Russell an extra second in a wider position to throw a difficult pass or make a kick, but over the last year, Scotland started to move beyond the 1-3-2-2 structure that had served them so well into a more adaptive multi-wave attack, where a handful of key playmakers call individual shapes. It's like a more instinctive evolution of Ireland's phase shape approach, where instead of setting in one big move, they have several smaller ones across the pitch instead, in several waves. Russell usually organising the primary pod, with either Tuipulotu or increasingly Blair Kinghorn sorting out the other from fullback. Tom Jordan, usually a fly-off himself for Glasgow, regularly filled in that role in the autumn as well, doing a beautiful job running a second wave of attack, as well as linking up with Russell for lovely tries such as this one, finished by Darcy Graham, as so many of them are. Kinghorn as such is quickly becoming Scotland's most important player, so good at sliding between being a thinker and a thumper, shifting from organising the play to being a strike runner in a split second. And yet over the last few games, Townsend has looked to further evolve how this team sets up the attack, beyond just relying on Russell, Kinghorn, Tuipulotu, Jordan. From this goal line dropout, Matt Fagerson runs the ball back and makes a great carry, and Russell just calls for forward pod, forward carry here, while his backline resets shape. The ball is out quicker than they can organise though, and Ikitau makes a fantastic tackle, but thankfully Scotland, opposite number Tuipulotu, his clear out is just as good. Meanwhile though, right, what we're going to look at really is three things that happen right here. Number one, Blair Kinghorn considers the ruck but just bounces out to immediately find a boot and remain alive, stay in the action. Like Ireland, Scotland want every body possible in motion, and as a kind of antithesis of the English defence, as many in as few defence space as possible, even if they're just running dummy lines or they're not realistic options. And hence every player bar Darcy Graham on his wing for the cross kick cram themselves into such a small area here. But with Russell only given the time to organise the front line, and secondary playmaker Kinghorn and Tuipulotu unavailable, Jamie Ritchie here takes it on himself, organising the pod shape and calling it all on his own. And when Scotland look for width, breaking apart to become the playmaking back in this scenario, throwing a great ball for Darge to make a great carry in turn, before Ritchie returns to his more traditional 7 role, taking Callaway clean off the ball and opening a space for Duan to run away down the wing. Scotland recycle, Finn orders one carry, then on the next phase he spots a bit of space and goes for it himself. But with Russell off his feet in past years, Scotland might have ground to a halt, but Kinghorn slots and just plays 10 effortlessly, with Tuipulotu running a gorgeous dummy line to hold Swalee. Dars gets on the outside and makes some ground, and with Russell still off his feet, the forwards just take over and take shape themselves, even without White calling anything. Fagerson here even floats off to join the next group on the second phase when he spots he isn't going to be needed to clear out here, which has given the time and forward momentum for Russell to bounce back up to his feet. He spots the overlap is on, and again, in past years, Scotland might put on him to sling a long ball over the top, but instead he squares up, fixes the defender, and lets Kinghorn throw the miss pass. Duan taking it and scoring with a swerve. Whilst Russell and Kinghorn still call the majority of play, with Russell the lion's share even of that, we are starting to see the forwards set shape themselves without needing someone in the boot to organise their shape. Jamie Ritchie trusted to act as a centre in those wider channels, being the organiser, the playmaker himself. It's going to be really interesting to how Scotland continue to adapt this attack, as it serves a dual purpose, keeping their play flowing nicely, but also freeing up Finn Russell, their madcap magician, to be available to do the wonderful shit we love to see him do, with less pressure on him, without the expectation of him keeping the entire Tier 1 attack ticking over solely on his shoulders. Scotland can open up any defence, and that makes them the ultimate wildcard in a tournament that feels wide open, with the potential to be amongst the best ever played. France and Ireland stand as favourites, formidable, brilliant teams at the top of their game. But England are quickly evolving into a top-end test side, capable of beating either of them, or even both. Italy are boasting maybe their best squad ever, presently with minimal injuries and looking to improve their record win count that they achieved last year, while Scotland can turn over anyone on their day, quietly hoping the entire world has switched off the expectations just long enough for them to finally make it their year. And Wales have a really cool stadium. We're just days away from Rugby Christmas, the most wonderful time of the year. Things open as a Cymru team with nothing to lose travel to Paris before Italy go hunting in Murrayfield, and Ireland look to get the title defence up and running against the only side to beat them last year, England. Because it all begins this Friday night. Prepare the pubs, ready your uncle, and tell Paula what impressive form Simone JC has been in. It could only be the Six Nations.
Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That was our big Six Nations preview. However, we have 6 more previews going up on our other second channel, more Squid Rugby. So if you want to go and have a look at those, please do.
So we're doing one on each team individually, and there's at least 1 or 2 analysis points on each one about some talking points and certain players and styles of play that they're each going to adopt, or at least we think going to the tournament. We could be completely wrong. We will be completely wrong.
Some of the things in this video we've expanded out. Some of them are just we've taken over talking points. They're all about half an hour long if you want more of that heading into the Six Nations this year. We also are going to be relaunching the Patreon for people that have been involved before. We're going to have a Squid Rugby Discord heading into the Six Nations. If you want to be involved in that, please head to patreon.com/Squid Rugby. There's going to be loads of other stuff. We're going to do exclusive podcasts over the course of the tournament. We're going to do loads of little bits. We're going to do all sorts to try and support the people that have been supporting the channel for so long, because they've allowed us to keep going and be here holding little rugby balls. This wouldn't exist otherwise. There wouldn't have been a 2015 World Cup without that.
You funded this.
Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to everyone that has supported the channel on Patreon over the last few years. We want to try and do more for you guys. And good luck to everyone. Also, as we head into the Squid Rugby Fantasy League, which is also going to be starting, there's a link in the description below to join that league there. We'll see you all next week when there will have been the start of Sixmas.
Happy Sixmas, one and all. Don't forget to make Nick Tompkins your fantasy league captain. Bye.
And Swansea, Neath, Bridgend, the Ospreys region has a new hero.